It's my pleasure today to introduce Leslie Wolff, who is a private practice occupational therapist here in town. She's a miracle worker, and she'll tell you a little more about that. She could work some miracles here, but I don't think anybody can afford her. Her maiden name is Gallagher and has deep roots to this community, so some of you may know some of her family from that. Anyway, she's a graduate of UPS and had worked at Progress Center for many years. That's where I got to know her, and is now in private practice offering pediatric services in occupational therapy. So please welcome Leslie Wolff.
It's a big crowd. I think Phil really thinks I need to practice speaking skills. But thank you very much for welcoming me today. He kind of took my introduction. I was going to say I grew up in this community and left after graduation for about 20 years, and then came back to Longview and had the joy and pleasure of working at Progress Center in early intervention for 9 years, actually. And it was with great sadness, really, that I left Progress Center, because that is my, hi Richard, Richard, I know Richard Sands from, he was neighbors with my parents, Dan and Joanne Gallagher, and I know his wife, who is an OT assistant, now retired, so I've had some interactions with them. Anyway, tangent, I'm a right-brain person, so I tend to not be very logical, sequential. You'll find that I'm going to be all over the board in my speaking, but I wanted to thank you, first of all, for the work that you do in this community for children, for families, and all the ways that you support the people of our community, because it makes a difference. That's really why I left Progress Center. I was finding there were not enough therapy services available in this community. Once kids turned 3 and graduated out of the program at Progress Center, we had to tell them they could go to Portland or Vancouver area or north to Olympia. They're pretty much, there's a little bit of services here in town, but not enough to meet the needs of kids once they turn 3. There were a lot of kids that fell through the cracks that didn't qualify for special education, moving on to the 3 to 5 program. So I got out of the boat, I'm walking on water, and take a leap of faith with this private practice, so that I could provide services to kids and families that need help. What Phil asked me, I think, to talk about sensory processing for you. This is a deep passion of mine, sensory processing therapy, and is a relatively new concept that I wanted to share with you all, and hopefully I can keep you alert enough, because after lunch our alertness level tends to go, full tummy. So I have no phone, so no cheating. I have $20. Hey, a few ears perk up. He's disqualified because he's heard this speech a few times. $20 for anybody that can name, oh, Richard might get it, the 7 sensory systems. Sleepy, dopey, happy, no.
Those all describe me.
Okay, so we know the 5, right? What are the 5 senses we learn about, like in kindergarten, first grade, right? What are they? Sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. Okay, there's 2 more. Anybody? Richard? No? Okay. One is called, they're internal senses, and one is called proprioception, and that's a really big term for where is my body in space, body awareness. So I'm going to pick on Phil. Phil, you get to stand up. Just to give you, he's a pediatric.
Yeah, I'm a baby.
So close your eyes, and I'm gonna move your arm. Okay, now put your other arm in the same position. Okay. Now open your eyes. Yeah, tickle him. Okay, you can open your eyes. How did you know where to put your other arm?
I did. I was a little higher here too.
Yeah. So how do you know? How do you know without, looking? How do you know where your arm is in space and where, when you go up the stairs? How do you know how high to lift your leg? There's receptors in your joints and muscles that tell your brain where your body is in space. Think about all the people walking down the street of New York City. How do they not run into each other? I mean, well, they do. They do, but the people that have poor body awareness are running into poles and sure, you use your vision, but you have to know where your body is to be able to maneuver around people. So that's proprioception. That's internal sense. The other internal sense is our sense of movement. It's called vestibular, or balance, movement, going on the rides or swings or those kinds of things. The older we get, the more sensitive to those things that we tend to be. So why is all of this important? So I do what's called sensory processing therapy, and you think, well, what does that mean? Well, there are kids, especially when the senses are developing, that if you think of the receptors from touch, taste, hearing, sight, smell, movement, and body awareness, all that input comes into the brain has to process it, and then we respond. It should be like I-5 with just smooth sailing to Portland and back, But for some kids, when it's developing, it's kind of like going down the road to Carroll's, up and, it takes a lot longer for the brain to get those messages, process it, and respond. Some kids, I tend to work with the kids, we're all sensory processing people. So if you hear, oh, that child's a sensory kid, if you hear that term, we're all sensory people. All children are sensory processing. That's how we learn. That's how you sit in your chair and you listen. You have a conversation. You go for a ride. You go skiing. Any of those activities that you enjoy. You bake. You use all your senses. For some kids, there are some kids that feel things extra strongly. We call them hypersensitive or over-responsive. They feel things too strongly. They smell things too strongly. They get overwhelmed by visual input. Those kids probably were labeled more as shy or super sensitive kids. And then there are kids on the other end that I work with that are called under-responsive. They're not feeling things strongly enough. So they are trying to they're putting things in their mouth and they're smelling everything and they're climbing and they're touching and that they are just trying to get more input. They don't feel it strongly enough. They're the kids that you give a lemon, most kids would go, and they're the ones going, their brain is not getting enough input. So these kids I work with to help families learn how to provide more input to help them be able to, so why do they need that? So that they can go to school, so that they can sit in a chair and color, that they can listen to a story, that they can go to sleep at night. Some kids just need more assistance to be able to go to sleep at night. So all those senses develop starting early on, first things in utero and when they're first born. Sense of smell. They've done studies about kids being able to identify their parent or their mother just by the smell. Taste, they turn to get milk. Movement, they start rolling. So if kids have sensitivities to movement, they might get delayed motor skills because they don't want to roll over because their brain's going, too much. So the therapy that we work is to help teach families how to help their children. We do what's called a sensory diet and provide them specifically with what they need to be working on to help their kids learn to transition, to go from one activity to another, to stay with it a little bit longer. It may involve swinging. I mean, imagine for yourself, so I have a little game sometimes I play with myself in the grocery store when I hear a child crying, and I can tell by the sound of their cry pretty much whether they're having a tantrum or if they're having a meltdown. And there's definitely a difference, because imagine if you're so movement sensitive that you don't want to go on a swing. Imagine your mom turning you around backwards, putting you in a cart with all these bright lights and this visual input going by as you're getting pushed backwards, and those kids and your feet are dangling. You know, if you've ever been on a ride yourself or on a train and you get this weird sense of movement because the other train starts moving and it just causes that disequilibrium. Some of those kids have a hard time in the grocery store and they just will throw tantrums. So trying to help the families is what my main goal is. I want you for a second to think about your own like sensory sensitivities. So how many people like mushrooms? How many can't stand them? Yeah, why don't you like them? Is it the texture or the smell, taste? Both, all of the above, yeah. That's what it is for me. I'm highly aware of my own sensitivities just because I'm dealing with it all the time. How about finger painting or getting your hands messy? How many people can't stand to get their hands messy? Anybody? Yeah? Hey, you're being honest. That's if you want to see I'm going to tell my husband, but if you want to paralyze him, he's super sensitive he probably needed OT when he was a kid, but if you want to paralyze him, put a plate of ribs in front of him with no utensils. I mean, he's like, what am I supposed to do with that? Because he doesn't want to get his hands messy. As we age, we develop what's called adaptive responses. Like, we know I can ask for utensils. You know, I don't particularly like finger painting, and I'm in the pediatric therapy business, so I do a lot of finger painting, but I can tell myself, oh, in 5 minutes this is going to be over and I can wash my hands. A 3 or 4-year-old, this could be on their hands for the rest of their life. You know, they just don't have a sense of when the activity is going to be over. So we learn to adjust and adapt. So how many, maybe when you're younger, how many people loved going on the rides? Like at the fair and stuff. How many people did it make sick to your stomach? Yeah, so we're all somewhere on that range of sensitivities. How many people love like candles burning and Scentsy and going to Bath and Body Works and smell kind of things? How many yeah. So it's just good to be aware of your sensory sensitivities, but also to be thinking about children that can be completely paralyzed by, think of a child that's overly sensitive to visual input, and you put them in a kindergarten classroom that has, you know, all these posters and things everywhere. As occupational therapists, we also look at that and help, you know, make modifications. I work with children that have autism, ADHD, just general developmental delays, a variety of syndromes, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome. Those are the type of kids that I work to help make their life a little bit better. So, are there any questions for me? What does
your therapy look like? What do you do to help?
That's a great question. Thank you. Typically, my first session is an evaluation, and I have the parents fill out a questionnaire that's actually a standardized assessment that gives me information about what's happening at home, bath time, bedtime. Are they a picky eater? I do a lot of feeding therapy because kids that have texture issues, just touching things, are not going to put it in their mouth, and they have developed a lot of aversions to eating because parents will tell them, oh, just take one bite, oh, just try it. Well, chewing and swallowing is the very last step of eating. You have to be able to have it be on your plate, touch it. Anyway, so to answer your question, after the evaluation, we set up the goals for the family. What is most important to you? That they can be potty trained, that they can dress themselves, that they can sit and listen to a book with me and go to sleep at night. So based on those goals established in the first session, I develop a plan of the therapy session. Typically, the first thing I do in the session is what I call sensory motor activities or sensory prep activities. That involves swing. I have in my therapy space, I have 2 hooks that I hang different swings on. I have a have a trampoline, a ball pit. It's a great fun place. Kids want to come play. My therapy business is called Kid Space Therapy, and I'm over in the Merck building. excuse me, so we do a lot of sensory prep activities to help with that kind of input, like recess, running, jumping, all that kind of input is calming and regulating. That's why I feel very passionately about kids not getting recess taken away, because it actually helps them prepare for the next activities of learning. So the first part of the therapy is doing some of that sensory motor preparation. Then we transition to a sit-down activity, usually for a couple of different reasons. Either we may be working on some fine motor skills, or we may be working on some texture exploration. We grab one of those boxes. I'm going to pass around a box that you can just take a peek in that has some different sensory activities that we may use to explore. I set a timer. I have a picture routine that I use, so it'll be a picture of the ball pit, and then when the timer goes off in 5 minutes, we transition to the next to help them learn those transitions. And they're responsible for going over, taking the picture off to do today and putting on the all done, so that they have to either stay with the activity till they hear the beeper, or they have to transition when it's time to be all done, because some of them get real fixated. Just this is an example. Yeah, maybe I'll do that real quick. So that's, I alternate usually movement, sit down, for kids that are sensory sensitive with different textures. Actually, well, I'll take these out. So these are really gross. my sensory issues. These are like sticky slugs. So, yeah, the kids. So you have to find ways to. I have to find ways to make it enticing for them to want to participate or want to touch things that they wouldn't typically. So like, I'll throw it at the whiteboard, and they think it's really funny because it'll stick on the board and start to go down. And if they're engaged in the activity, they're more likely then for me to say, "Oh, here, touch it." No, their first response is ew. But if you throw it and make it a fun activity, they'll go over, they're like, "Oh, that's really funny," and go pick it up and bring it back. So what I'm doing is establishing positive associations with trying new things. Because if they come and they're just playing, if they're at, if I'm not challenging them a little bit, we're just playing. But if I challenge them too far, then they get a negative association and they're less likely to try it the next time. So the challenge for me as a therapist is to entice them and help them build positive associations with trying new things, rather than just being on high alert all the time. The kids that don't feel things strongly enough, we're like digging in things, trying to give them more input. A lot of climbing, heavy work activities. Like I always tell the parents, have them mow the lawn, have them bring in the gallon of milk. Any of those kinds of heavy work activities are really calming and regulating for kids. So I'm going to pass around some of these things. This is a vibration thing, and kids that are under-responsive, that need more input, they love this because it's like, oh, I can feel it, it's vibrating, it's color. And some of them will even like put it on their, which to me is like too much stimulus. I mean, you'll see it's pretty strong. But then there are the under-responsive kids that think, oh, that's really cool. Ooh, they touch it, ooh. But they think it's fun. So I modify the activity to help them engage in a lot of different activities. So I'll pass, there's 2 boxes and here's another one. Oh, yeah, if you're texture sensitive, they think this is really funny. This is the flarp. It's sticky and wet. And I use a lot of descriptors rather than ew, yuck, which is what they tend to learn. Like, oh, it's wet, it's cold, it's sticky, it's slimy. Yeah. And then they think it's funny because yeah. So especially the little boys, they just laugh and then they'll stick their fingers in it. So there you go. There. Yeah.
It's over there.
So those are just some. Is there another question? Does that answer your question? So I keep going, and then at the end there's a picture of the shoes, because sometimes the hardest transition is leaving, which I'd rather have them throw a fit at the end of the session than coming into the session like, no, I don't want to go. But it's usually at the end they don't want to leave because they're having a really good time. Yes?
How long is the session per session?
I usually do about a 55-minute session, just to give myself a couple of minutes to clean up and prep for the next for the next session. And an hour of therapy a week, and I do weekly services. doesn't, and I tell all the parents this too, the hour a week is not going to make a difference. Your child, you're with them 24/7. This is what I usually give them a takeaway. So this week, this is what we worked on today, and here's how you can incorporate it into your everyday living. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Get you to stay just a second.
What's that?
I wanted to thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
We got a little Lions mug for you to put your favorite beverage in. Thank you very much.
Yeah, little oral sensory input.
Yes.
Thank you.